You're watching the SEGADriven YouTube channel, and it's back to our Sonic Amateur Games Expo 2023 coverage with a look at NiGHTS Open Dreams, developed by Ichorix. So, a 3D NiGHTS fan game. We've got a lot of NiGHTS love on the old stage floor this year. Obviously, the theming of the entire event is very NiGHTS themed. And I've definitely spotted at least a couple of NiGHTS fan games, which is a couple more than most fan game events, to be honest with you. So it's really lovely to see NiGHTS, being given centre stage at this event. So this is a 3D NiGHTS fan game. So you're given open movement prior to activating any sort of level or boss, which is interesting to say the least. And then once you go through the Idea Palace to activate the start of the level, then it switches back to your sort of 2D NiGHTS traditional controls, where you're on a set path and you have sort of free movement, sort of left and right, you can obviously do loops and fly around wherever you want, sort of thing. But it's not in a full three-dimensional space. You're basically locked to a sort of left and right horizontal motion throughout the stage. The idea, obviously, once you start the stage itself, is to get enough blue chips to open the cages, and then bring the Idias back to the palace at the start, and then it starts the next sequence, and you have to do this 5 times before you activate the boss. It's very much the traditional setup in that regard. What is missing, unfortunately, at the moment is the tricking, so you can't really, rack up a really high score and get a decent rank at the end of the stage. It's very much just flying around through loops and getting blue chips to open the Idia cages to bring the Idia back to the palace. It's that sort of setup, and it works for the most part in the levels. I think it's a pretty solid setup there. You have good movement. It feels nice to move around the stages. The setup is actually pretty well done. Like the actual level layouts themselves are very interesting, and they get you to move around in a nice way, and make use of the loop ability to bring in the blue chips. And you also have the boost-in mechanic as well, so that you can get around faster. It's pretty well done in the actual level itself. The actual 3D open world movement is the real issue at the moment. So you do have mouse and keyboard controls, and also joypad controls, but joypad controls are completely broken. So the moment you start moving with the joypad controls, the camera just starts rotating around the character, and there's nothing you can do about that. It's impossible to know exactly where you're going, because the camera is always rotating around the character. Completely impossible with joypad controls, which is a real shame, because in the actual level itself, joypad controls work incredibly well and are my preferred way of playing this game. It's a lot more comfortable to use a joypad when you're in the actual level itself, but once you're in the open world and you're moving around in 3 dimensions, it's impossible. You can't do anything because the camera keeps rotating around the character, so you can't know where you're going at any given point. It's impossible to navigate with that. So it's over to keyboard and mouse for the 3D open world segments, which is also incredibly uncomfortable. So the big issue is moving NiGHTS around with WSAD. You just don't have the movement isn't smooth enough. It's too jerky. It's too quick, and it makes it impossible to move around with any sort of finite movements to really sort of like zone in on the blue chips or the loops. It's just too. It's too fast. It's too the cornering is too tight. It's incredibly difficult to maneuver around with the keyboard. It needs to be a lot more subtle, the motion. It needs to allow you to make those very finite little adjustments to movement to be able to do things with the level of precision that it's asking of you. It's just it's too much. It's too much, unfortunately. It's really, really difficult to control NiGHTS in a 3D open space with this set of controls. It might be better with joypad, but unfortunately joypad is completely out of the picture just because of that rotating camera bug. It's not very good. And then to top it all off, the boss is, I just don't understand how you're supposed to beat it, to be honest with you. I eventually figured out that I was doing some damage if I was doing loops around him, but there's no obvious tells as to when he's vulnerable to the loop. So I just basically took the hits, essentially sank a load of hits. It added a load of time to my counter, but at the end of the day, it gave me enough. It gave me enough opportunities to do damage to the boss to beat it, but it was very tedious. I was basically just, you know, doing loops around the boss for the entire time, eventually hoping that it would make some sort of impact on him. And yeah, it did eventually, but it was basically just really dull and boring, me going around in loops around a boss that wasn't very clear as to what I was supposed to be doing. It's doing attacks, it's doing stuff. It's very much obvious that you're supposed to play this in a specific way, but it's not clear as to when it's attacking you, when you're supposed to be attacking it. I just cannot quite fathom what you're supposed to be doing in that boss battle. So I basically just sat on top of him doing loops, waiting for him to die, which isn't very enjoyable. So yeah, this has problems, unfortunately. It's a real shame because clearly a lot of work has gone into the presentation. It looks lovely, a lot of detail in the environment, and when you're in the actual level itself, and you know, using the more traditional horizontal movement through the stage and not having to worry about 3 dimensions, it works really well. There's something decent there, you know. Like, there's a good start to a great little NiGHTS fan game in here, unfortunately. But the 3D movement at the moment, it needs joypad support that actually works. And if you're gonna force the keyboard and mouse controls on people, then you need more finite control over your movement through the air, because at the moment it's just too jerky, too quick and tight, and it just doesn't make things very easy to control. I was just having a real hard time trying to move around this world in 3D. But yeah, it works okay in 2D. Like I say, once you enter the level, really good stuff. I was quite impressed with it. But 3D doesn't work at all, and the boss is just so unclear as to what you're supposed to be doing that I just gave up and just sat on top of him and did loops until he died. So yeah, not a great first impression, unfortunately, NiGHTS Open Dreams. I think there is potential in here, but it definitely needs to lock things into the 2D space as per traditional NiGHTS games. I don't think the 3D open world movement, unfortunately, is the one right now. It's just too difficult to control with keyboard and mouse, and it's completely broken on joypad. So yeah, bit of a shame, but hopefully they can fix this for the next release.